Pleasure to me all at last, and welcome back to films I should have talked about years ago. Now, as you probably have already known, there were tons of movies out there that I've had the chance to watch, and I was able to see a lot of somewhat good films, somewhat bad films, films that could probably be average by any means, and I was even able to get a glimpse of probably some of the worst pieces of garbage to ever be produced and released into the wild. So, you know what? Let's go for something that's also a bit more average, called Goon from 2011. A hockey player ends up meeting a few changes. Not just with all the things that happen out there in the hockey rink, but also with life that happens outside of it, including the introduction of family. And I will say for sure, at least for something like this, something that does happen to capitalize on the many highlights that NHL itself happens to put together. And I will say for sure that I played a lot of NHL myself. EA Sports does a fantastic job at it. At least with giving us something that's relative to what the sport really is like. And, well, when talking about a film relating to something like this, I will say that Goon does not necessarily do as good as many others probably would have back then. But by today's standards, I guess some people had to come up with something out there. But anyways, looking at Goon 2011, exactly 10 years ago now, we have quite a few things out there that seem to be wrong in a way. From the action that takes place on the rink, especially with all the fight sequences that take place. As you know, it's almost a tradition in a way for hockey players to fight each other pretty much, especially if some rules are broken. But, man, I can't necessarily put my finger on the whole entire thing itself, but for a film like this, start to finish, I'm not really saying that I actually like to see every single moment about it because, man, can it get pretty violent. At least for something like this, from 10 years ago now, the same exact year, 2011, where there were a boatload of other big films out there, including the last ever Harry Potter film with Dan Radcliffe. And let's also not forget that Captain America the First Avenger was also released in 2011. And let's also not forget that about the fact that 2011 also brought on a big lineage of other things out there. YouTube videos, video games, and books, for the most part. So, Goon. Maybe not much else. So, I once again apologize if not everything's going to come back to mind, but considering how I was able to see the film, I was able to see how hastily well put together it somehow was. And if I wanted to give this thing a score based on how the fact I was able to view it, at the same time that I was also able to view a few other things, including the Cloverfield Paradox and Alpha Dog. Yeah, I saw all three of those films at the same time on that same exact day, as I recall, April 7th, 2020. So, well over a year ago. But giving this thing a score, considering from what I was able to see, considering what I was able to get at from the plot line and the storyboard, not to mention the cast, I'd have to say, unfortunately, 5.2 out of 10 is probably the best I would have to give something like this. But then again, when you consider many other things that are well put together, I probably would have given this a higher score. Maybe if I would have gotten another viewing of it right before I did all this, then it's not necessarily going to be much easier for my time. But then again, considering what I've already talked about in full, or at least in some detail, well, anything seems possible by this point. And hopefully I will be able to talk about other things. And I've even heard that there was a sequel to this that came out just a few years later. So you know what? Goon, The Last Enforcers, is something that'll be coming up pretty soon. But I still got a pretty long schedule ahead of me, quite lengthy in fact. So don't necessarily expect Goon 2, The Last Enforcers to come around like right now even. So anyways, if you want to see more go down on my channel, then well, make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.